Now let me explain that. I got into a barroom fight. I was carrying a gun.
Country music often paints a picture of simple times. Acoustic guitars on porches, heartfelt lyrics about love and loss. But behind that idealized image lies a long trail of chaos, drama, and downright bad behavior. Some of the very artists who gave the genre its soul were also responsible for some of its darkest moments. Whether they were throwing punches, picking fights, or just plain breaking the law, these artists were as famous for their temper and misdeeds as they were for their music. Stick around as we count down 21 country stars who made headlines not just for their hits, but for acting like total jerks. Starting things off with Willie Nelson.
But you were always on my mind.
Willie Nelson is a legend with a voice full of soul and a long braid of stories behind him. His fans love him for his honesty and laid-back vibe, but behind that mellow image, Willie could be just as stubborn and selfish as any rock star. He had a reputation for walking away from deals, ignoring advice, and treating some band members like they were disposable. In his personal life, he juggled multiple marriages, including one he kept secret from his first wife. He had children with several women and wasn't always around to raise them. Then came the IRS scandal. Willie racked up millions in unpaid taxes and attempted to shield his assets, but the government wasn't fooled. They seized much of his property. Although fans came to his rescue and helped him financially, many believed he brought the trouble on himself. And of course, there was the weed, lots of it.
I smoke pot. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana, and it's none of the government's business.
Willie was proudly open about his marijuana use, which some saw as a badge of freedom and others viewed as irresponsibility. He also took strong political stances, backing liberal candidates and causes that rubbed parts of his fan base the wrong way. Willie Nelson was, and is, a symbol of freedom and rebellion. But, depending on who you ask, he was also a difficult man who didn't always think about the people he left in the dust. Up next, we have George Jones.
Kept hoping she'd come back again.
Known for his powerful voice and emotionally raw performances, George Jones was also infamous for being unreliable. His nickname, No-Show Jones, came from his chronic habit of missing concerts. Fans would buy tickets, pack the venue, only to be told George wasn't going to show. Whether it was due to drugs, alcohol, or just apathy, he repeatedly let down the very people who supported his career. In 1999, during the Country Music Association Awards, he was asked to perform a shortened version of his hit Choices. Instead of cooperating, he threw a fit and refused to play at all. In a bold show of solidarity, Alan Jackson interrupted his own set to perform the full version of Jones's song, a moment that made headlines. Jones didn't apologize much, or at all. He carried himself with an air of invincibility, as though he believed his talent excused his behavior. And while his impact on country music is undeniable, so is the disappointment many fans felt from his repeated no-shows and diva-like antics. The next in our list is Porter Wagoner.
We got time for one more song before we close the show.
Porter Wagoner was impossible to miss. Between his glimmering rhinestone suits and signature blonde pompadour, he looked every bit the flashy country star. And for a time, he was just that. A household name in country music and host of his own TV variety show. But Wagoner's biggest claim to infamy came not from what he wore, but from his infamous fallout with Dolly Parton. For years, Dolly was a fixture on his show, serving as his duet partner and trusted co-host. Their musical chemistry was electric, but as Dolly's star rose, she made the decision to strike out on her own. Porter didn't take that well. The split led to a bitter legal battle. Porter reportedly felt betrayed by Dolly's exit and tried to block her solo success. The two stopped speaking, and the professional breakup became personal. While Dolly eventually expressed gratitude for what she learned from him, the damage was done. Porter remained a staple in country music, but his controlling behavior and the messy public feud with Dolly Parton cast a permanent shadow over his legacy. Next up is Loretta Lynn.
It'll be over my dead body, so get out while you can.
Loretta Lynn became a household name by singing about topics other artists wouldn't touch, from birth control to abusive relationships. Her songs made her a feminist icon, even though she never claimed the label. But behind her tough, fearless music was a woman known for being combative and territorial. She didn't take criticism well. Bandmates, managers, and fellow artists often found themselves on the receiving end of her sharp words if they dared to disagree. Loretta was known to shut people down publicly, using her words like weapons, sometimes in the middle of interviews or backstage at shows. When new female voices began rising in country music, Loretta wasn't exactly welcoming. According to insiders, she saw other women not as allies, but as rivals. She guarded her throne with ferocity, often making it clear that there was only room for one queen in her court. And while she sang about standing by her man, people close to her said she often exploited personal drama, whether from her tumultuous marriage or professional rivalries, to fuel her fame. Her public image was that of a tough but lovable country girl. But behind the curtain, Loretta Lynn ruled her world with control, pride, and a sharp tongue. Up next is Buck Owens.
Together again, the gray skies are gone.
Buck Owens helped shape the raw, twangy Bakersfield sound that stood in contrast to the slick production coming out of Nashville. With hit after hit and a high-profile TV presence on Hee Haw, Buck became a household name. But behind the grin and guitar was a man surrounded by tension and rumor. One of the biggest stories that haunted Buck was his alleged rivalry with Merle Haggard. The rumors claimed the tension came from Merle marrying Buck's ex-wife, Bonnie Owens. Some fans believed Buck held a grudge, while others thought it was Merle who couldn't let go. Merle later tried to shut the gossip down, insisting there was no real feud, just two men taking different paths. Then came the strange theories. A religious figure from St. Louis once accused Buck's version of Bridge Over Troubled Water of promoting heroin use, a bizarre and unfounded claim, but one that stirred controversy nonetheless. Listeners also complained about Buck's musical choices, especially his heavy use of drums, which was unusual for country at the time. There were even whispers that he was blacklisted from country radio, though nothing was ever confirmed. Through it all, Buck kept doing things his way, but it left him with a career marked by innovation, resistance, and more than a little drama. Right on cue, we have Jerry Lee Lewis.
Fire, kiss me, baby. Ooh, it feels good.
Nicknamed The Killer, Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't just an early rock and roll legend, he was also one of the genre's most volatile figures. His breakout hit Whole Lot of Shakin' Goin' On catapulted him to stardom, followed quickly by Great Balls of Fire and Breathless. But while his music rocked stages across the country, his personal life spun out of control. The public turned on him when news broke that he had secretly married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra, while still legally married to another woman. Fans were horrified, and Lewis's tour was promptly canceled. His popularity nosedived overnight. His destructive behavior didn't stop there. He once accidentally shot a member of his band, and later, another crew member. Allegations of domestic abuse also surfaced, especially during his fourth marriage. There were also swirling suspicions around the unexplained deaths of both his fifth wife and another woman close to him, though nothing was ever officially proven. Perhaps, most famously, he drove drunk to Elvis Presley's Graceland estate with a loaded pistol on the dashboard and smashed his car into the gates. He was arrested on the spot. On top of his wild antics, Lewis struggled with long-term health issues and heavy addictions to pills and alcohol. His music legacy is undeniable, but so is the string of chaos he left behind. For many, Jerry Lee Lewis is remembered more for being dangerous than dazzling. Up next is Charlie Rich.
Oh, no one knows what goes on behind closed doors.
Charlie Rich had a silky voice, smooth piano skills, and a string of hits that helped define the countrypolitan sound of the 1970s. But one shocking moment at the Country Music Association Awards changed how many people saw him. Forever. In 1975, Rich was given the honor of announcing the Entertainer of the Year. As he stood on stage and opened the envelope, he saw the winner, John Denver. Rather than congratulate him, Charlie pulled out a lighter and lit the envelope on fire, right there in front of the stunned audience. It was a jaw-dropping moment. Some thought he was drunk. Others believed it was his way of protesting the CMA's decision to award someone who brought a pop sound to country. Either way, the act was seen as petty and deeply disrespectful. The backlash came fast. Fans and fellow artists condemned the outburst. Charlie's reputation, once sterling, took a massive hit, and his popularity never fully recovered. He became known less for his music and more for the night he burned down his own legacy, one flame at a time. Moving on with Conway Twitty.
I see the want-to in your eyes.
Conway Twitty might be remembered for his rich baritone and romantic ballads, but behind all that crooning was a man with a complicated personal life and a reputation for selfishness. He first gained fame in the 1950s with rockabilly hits before transitioning into country music, where his career exploded. He teamed up with Loretta Lynn for a string of successful duets, and their chemistry seemed flawless on stage. But off stage, Conway's behavior told another story. He was married 4 times, and none of those relationships ended well. He was often more committed to his music career than to the women in his life. According to those close to him, Conway had a tendency to lose interest quickly and move on, leaving emotional wreckage behind. While his fans adored him, many who worked with him described him as self-centered and emotionally unavailable. He acted like a star and treated others like extras in the Conway Twitty Show. Next is Tom T. Hall.
Country's living in the city.
Tom T. Hall called himself the storyteller, and for good reason. He had a knack for turning ordinary moments into unforgettable songs. His music felt warm, wise, and relatable. But behind the scenes, some folks saw a different man altogether. Despite being revered by fans and fellow musicians alike, Tom wasn't known for sharing the spotlight or credit. If someone contributed an idea to one of his songs, they'd often find themselves left out of the liner notes. He preferred working alone and made it clear he didn't need input from others. Young songwriters who idolized him quickly discovered that their hero wasn't interested in mentoring or collaboration. He kept people at arm's length and, according to many, believed no one else could write quite like him. One particularly telling moment came when Bob Dylan gave a speech praising several artists, and jokingly referred to Tom's song "I Love" as a bit overcooked. Rather than laugh it off, Tom got defensive. His ego, it seemed, was a little more fragile than expected. While his lyrics painted a picture of a down-to-earth storyteller, those who worked with him often felt they were dealing with someone guarded, cold, and difficult. Next in our lineup is Faron Young. Faron Young had the voice of a star and the temper of a ticking time bomb. On stage, he could charm a crowd. But once the lights went out, it was a different story entirely. At a concert in West Virginia, a woman in the audience reportedly spat at him. Instead of brushing it off or letting security handle it, Faron took matters into his own hands, storming off stage and spanking her in front of everyone. He was arrested for assault. His home life wasn't much calmer. In one particularly explosive argument, Faron fired a gun into the ceiling, while his family was still in the house. It was a reckless act that triggered another run-in with the law, yet even in the face of legal trouble and growing backlash, Faron rarely showed remorse. He often painted himself as the victim, blaming others for his declining career and public image. As his behavior worsened, so did his isolation. Friends pulled away. The industry began to distance itself. Eventually, Faron slipped into depression and heavy drinking. In 1996, he took his own life. In his suicide note, he blamed his failing health and the music business for letting him down. But those who knew him best also recognized how his temper and self-destructive choices had pushed so many away. At the halfway point is Tammy Wynette.
Stand by your man and show the world you love him.
Tammy Wynette earned the nickname First Lady of Country Music, but she wasn't exactly a model of the values she sang about. Her iconic track, Stand By Your Man, became a cultural flashpoint, viewed by some as a sweet love song, and by others as a damaging message encouraging women to stay in toxic relationships. While she defended the song as a simple tribute to commitment, the backlash was fierce, especially from feminists who called it outdated and harmful. Tammy did her best to shrug it off, but it became clear she didn't enjoy being the center of controversy, unless she was controlling the narrative. In 1992, Hillary Clinton made a cheeky remark referencing "Stand By Your Man" during a campaign interview, and Tammy fired back, demanding an apology. Her reaction seemed less about principle and more about pride. Off stage, Tammy's personal life was no fairy tale. She went through 5 marriages, including one with George Jones, marked by public fights and emotional upheaval. Even after her death, legal battles over her estate kept her name in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Behind the soft voice and tragic ballads was a woman who fiercely protected her image, no matter how messy the truth really was. Following up, we have Marty Robbins.
The moon and stars no longer shine.
With his showy outfits, charming smile, and smooth vocals, Marty Robbins was the full package, at least on the surface. He mastered both country and crossover pop hits, and audiences loved him. But behind that cowboy charisma was a man obsessed with staying at the top. Robbins didn't like to share the spotlight. At concerts and festivals, he was known to demand the longest time slot, the best lighting, and top billing. If someone else was scheduled to go after him or receive more attention, he didn't take it lightly. Show organizers often found themselves in tense negotiations with Marty, who wasn't shy about arguing or threatening to pull out of shows unless he got what he wanted. Backstage, other performers said he could be explosive and combative, especially if he felt upstaged. To the crowd, Marty was the polished entertainer, but to many of his peers he was controlling and obsessed with maintaining superiority. His drive for success wasn't just strong, it was ruthless. Moving on with the list is Johnny Paycheck.
Mama tried to stop me short of stealing.
Johnny Paycheck was born to sing outlaw country, but he lived it long before the hits started rolling in. Back in the 1950s, when he was still in the Navy, he got into a physical altercation with a superior officer. That one bad decision led to a court-martial and a 2-year prison sentence. But that was just the beginning. In Wyoming, Paycheck found himself in serious legal trouble after being involved with a 12-year-old girl. Rather than going through a trial, he entered a no-contest plea and paid a fine. But even without jail time, his reputation took a huge hit. Then came the infamous barroom shooting. In a heated argument with another man, Johnny pulled out a gun and shot the man in the head. Miraculously, the victim survived. Paycheck insisted it was self-defense, but the court disagreed. He was sentenced to 7 years behind bars, though he served less than 2 before receiving a pardon. Between the arrests, violence, and reckless behavior, Paycheck's life was a mess of impulsive choices and steep consequences. He didn't just perform outlaw country, he embodied every part of it. Up next is Lefty Frizzell.
The daughter of a wealthy, wealthy man.
Lefty Frizzell was a trailblazer in country music with a voice that inspired generations of singers. But his past carried a stain that never fully faded. In his late teens, he was convicted of statutory misconduct, a charge stemming from a relationship with an underage girl. Instead of showing remorse, Frizzell focused his time in jail on writing songs. One of those, I Love You 1,000 Ways, became a hit and launched his career. When he was released, the scandal slowed his momentum, and he had to work in the oil fields before returning to music. Despite regaining popularity, many in the industry and among fans couldn't overlook what he had done. His career eventually recovered, but that part of his past never disappeared. Frizzell may have been a pioneer of country music's sound, but he also carried a troubling legacy many couldn't ignore. The next on the list is Waylon Jennings.
To look in the mirror in total surprise.
Waylon Jennings was a founding father of outlaw country, a title he earned both through his music and his rebellious attitude. He rejected the polished sound of Nashville in favor of gritty, honest songs that resonated with outsiders. But Waylon's strong will didn't just show up in his music. It caused plenty of problems in real life, too. In the mid-1980s, he was invited to take part in We Are the World, the massive charity recording aimed at helping famine victims in Ethiopia. During the session, Stevie Wonder suggested including a line in Swahili. Waylon objected, pointing out that Swahili wasn't even spoken in Ethiopia. The disagreement became uncomfortable, and rather than continue, Waylon quietly walked out of the studio. The song went on without him, and the Swahili line was dropped. Still, his departure became part of the lore surrounding the event. Decades later, the moment was featured in a Netflix documentary titled The Greatest Night in Pop. Even long after the fact, his name sparked debate. When country singer Luke Bryan made comments about Waylon that were seen as disrespectful, angry fans came out swinging online. Some even sent threats. Waylon eventually overcame his addictions in 1984 and continued performing. But no matter how many shows he played or records he sold, he never lost the image of being a hard-headed outlaw who refused to compromise. Up next is none other than Johnny Cash.
The only thing that's real.
Johnny Cash will always be remembered as one of country music's most iconic figures. With his deep baritone and signature black attire, the Man in Black became a symbol of pain, rebellion, and redemption. His music spoke to broken souls, but his personal life often told a much messier story. Cash's battles with drug addiction were well documented. He was hooked on pills and found himself arrested multiple times. In one particularly bizarre incident, he got so high he wandered off to pick flowers and ended up in jail. That strange misadventure later inspired his song Starkville City Jail. He had a heart for justice, though not always delivered in the cleanest way. He championed causes like Native American rights and was outspoken against the Vietnam War, a stance that earned him death threats from hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Things got so tense that his manager actually had to meet with Klan leaders in an attempt to ease the pressure. Cash may have sung about trying to be a better man, but off stage he often struggled to live up to those ideals. For some, he was a fearless truth-teller. For others, a chaotic force who left a trail of damage in his wake. Either way, Johnny Cash was never boring and never easy to figure out. Next on the list is David Allan Coe.
Say it's a long walk to Nashville, would you like to ride?
David Allan Coe's early years were anything but easy. He bounced between juvenile institutions and prison throughout his youth, living a life full of struggle before ever stepping onto a stage. When he was finally released, he poured himself into music, starting out by singing blues tunes on the sidewalks of Nashville, hoping someone would take notice. Eventually, Coe gravitated toward country music, becoming a key player in the 1970s outlaw country movement. With his rugged look, no-filter lyrics, and fierce independence, he quickly became a symbol of rebellion in the genre. Songs like You Never Even Called Me By My Name, The Ride, and Long-Haired Redneck became staples of his discography. But while his fan base celebrated his unfiltered voice and raw authenticity, the industry kept its distance. Coe's lyrics often veered into territory that critics labeled racist, sexist, and outright offensive. His refusal to play by the rules and his unpredictable behavior made him nearly impossible for Nashville to fully embrace. To his supporters, Coe was a truth-teller who refused to sell out. To everyone else, he was a walking controversy that no PR team wanted to manage. Coming up is Merle Haggard.
The good times really over for good.
Merle Haggard lived many lives. Convict, chart-topping star, political lightning rod. His hit, Okie from Muskogee, was both a smash success and a cultural grenade. On the surface, it sounded like a proud anthem for traditional American values. But many listeners felt it mocked progressive movements of the 1960s, including those fighting for civil rights and personal freedom. Haggard's message seemed to change depending on the day. At times, he defended the song with pride. Other times, he downplayed its intent, even saying he regretted writing it altogether, after it had already earned him fortune and fame. His personal history didn't help soften his image. Before his music career, Haggard spent time behind bars. Eventually, he was pardoned by California Governor Ronald Reagan, a twist that only added to his polarizing image. Later in life, Merle remained vocal in politics, often ruffling feathers with his blunt commentary. Fans either saw him as a patriotic outlaw or an outdated provocateur. Either way, Merle Haggard's career was never just about the music. It was always tangled up in controversy. Up next is Roger Miller.
Like a pendulum do, Bobby's on bicycles 2x2.
Charmed the world in the 1960s with his witty, upbeat songs like Dang Me, King of the Road, and England Swings. His music was lighthearted, clever, and full of personality. Fans adored the humorous twist he brought to country, a breath of fresh air in a genre often steeped in heartbreak. But while his public persona was all smiles and jokes, those who worked with him saw another side. Roger was extremely confident in his own creativity, and not always in a good way. He often rejected suggestions from producers or collaborators with a smirk or an eye roll, acting as though no one could match his comedic genius. He had a habit of brushing off others' ideas and making it clear he didn't think he needed anyone's input. For some, his swagger came off as arrogance. Colleagues who once admired his sharp mind found themselves walking away feeling dismissed or disrespected. His music may have sparked laughter across the country, but behind the scenes, Roger Miller's pride and stubbornness made collaboration nearly impossible. Next up is Billy Joe Shaver.
Clouds grew dark and promised, but they didn't rain a thing.
Billy Joe Shaver wasn't just a songwriter, he was a walking, talking country song. Rough around the edges with a poetic soul, Shaver helped shape the outlaw country sound from behind the scenes. But while his lyrics were filled with heart, his real-life choices often made headlines for all the wrong reasons. In 2007, Shaver found himself in serious legal trouble after an altercation at a bar in Lorena, Texas. During an argument, he pulled out a pistol and shot a man in the face. His defense? That the man was threatening him and had dared him to do it. Shaver claimed it was self-defense, famously asking the court, "Do you want me to lie about it?" The case went to trial, and after a tense courtroom battle that pulled in high-profile witnesses like Willie Nelson and Robert Duvall, he was ultimately acquitted. But the shooting wasn't some isolated wild moment. Billy Joe's life was riddled with tragedy and turbulence, from losing fingers in a sawmill accident as a young man to enduring the deaths of his wife, mother, and only son in a span of 2 years. He battled addiction, brawled in bars, and never backed down from a fight, physical or musical. Shaver's outlaw credentials were never in question. He wrote the songs that defined the movement, but also lived the kind of life that left scars on both his body and his reputation. To his fans, he was a flawed poet. To others, a loose cannon. Either way, Billy Joe Shaver proved that being real sometimes means being reckless. Next on the list is Hank Williams Sr.
Say, hey, sweet baby, don't you think, baby?
Hank Williams Sr. helped shape country music as we know it. With a haunting voice and emotional lyrics, he crafted classics like I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, touching millions. His influence was so powerful that even after his death, a dozen of his songs hit #1 on the charts. But while his talent was extraordinary, his personal demons were relentless. He struggled with alcoholism and chronic pain, which led to him frequently missing shows or arriving too drunk to perform. When he was at his best, he could captivate an audience like few others. But those moments grew rare as his addictions took over. Fans couldn't understand how someone who wrote such beautiful songs could be so self-destructive. His erratic behavior and inability to maintain professional commitments cast a shadow over his career. Despite his status as a musical giant, Hank Sr. lived a life full of sorrow and setbacks. His legacy remains legendary, but also tragically short-lived. Last but not least, we have the son, Hank Williams, Jr.
Country music singers have always been a real close-knit family.
Hank Williams, Jr. had a legendary last name to live up to, and he did it with fire, controversy, and zero apologies. He inherited his father's musical talent, but also carried the same rebellious spirit and appetite for trouble. One of his most controversial songs, If the South Woulda Won, painted a picture of a fictional world where the Confederacy had triumphed. While some took it as playful fantasy, others heard it as a not-so-subtle nod to outdated and dangerous ideals. The backlash was swift, but Hank Jr. didn't back down. Then, in 2011, he made a remark comparing President Barack Obama to Adolf Hitler. The fallout was immediate. ESPN dropped his long-running Monday Night Football theme, an anthem that had been a TV staple for years. Hank Jr. didn't seem fazed by the firestorm. He had always spoken his mind, and no amount of public outrage was going to change that. For better or worse, he stuck to his guns, even when it cost him dearly. From Johnny Paycheck's bar fights to Hank Jr.'s political firebombs, these stars weren't just singing about hard living, they were living it. Their scandals, tempers, and egos were often as big as their talents. Some left legacies tarnished by controversy. Others seemed to thrive on the chaos. But one thing's for sure. Behind every hit song was a complicated, often infuriating personality. Which one shocked you the most? Who did we miss? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Because country music legends aren't always what they seem.